This has got to be one of my favorite childhood movies, and I'm excited for this opportunity, as now a grown-up myself, to go back and dive deep into Hook. Did you see this movie? What did you think? Let's talk about that in the comments. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk, letting you know that ahead of time, theological analysis for Hook. This movie is such a classic. I mean, come on. Steven Spielberg, Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins, Julia Roberts. Great direction, great cast, great writing. Overall, it is an incredibly interesting movie taking a look at this question, what if Peter Pan grew up? And of course, taking a look at that question, it asks, what does it even mean to be a grown-up? So I'm excited to dive into this movie. This comes to you courtesy of Aaron White. He's one of my patrons on Patreon. He upped his pledge to where he can ask a spoiler talk and a theological analysis from me. And this is the theological analysis that he chose. So thank you so much, Aaron, for being a supporter. It means so much to me to have you on board. And if you would like to check out my Patreon page and see the rewards for the different levels of giving, I have the link to that in the description.
Okay, he's back.
Who?
What if Peter Pan grew up? It's such a simple question, such a simple concept. Yet 30 years later, it's such an amazing classic. Hook is so good. It has a great story that has multiple layers, and that cast, nobody could have played Peter or Hook like Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman.
Peter Pan, prepare to meet thy doom. Dark and sinister man, heaven.
The thing that makes this movie so good 30 years later is taking that simple question and asking, what if Peter Pan grew up? Because what they're really asking when they ask that question is, what does it actually mean to grow up?
You must make yourself remember.
Remember what?
Peter, don't you know who you are?
At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? It's me, right? It's me. He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Here's the picture that comes to my mind as I'm reading those verses. I picture all the adults standing around thinking about their future and their own honor and glory. Jesus, I'm the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, right? And I picture the children living in the moment. They are so excited to be here with Jesus, and that's what's making them jump for joy. And what does Jesus do? He says, change and become like these children. In other words, living in that moment, that simple belief and awe and wonder. And I feel like that's the theme of this movie. And we really see it play out through our two main characters. Our title character, Hook.
See how greatly the men favour you, sir.
The puling spawn, how I despise them.
Go get him, Captain!
And Peter Pan, who becomes Peter Banning and grows up.
You're Peter?
Yes.
You're Peter?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You're Peter?
Peter Pan runs away from home and comes to Never Never Land, as this movie says, because all kids have to grow up someday, and everybody that grows up has to die. So it's this fear of death that drove him to run away. Tinkerbell finds him and takes him to Neverland and teaches him to fly. Now, while he lives in Neverland, he does grow up to a point. You know, he does remain a kid forever to have fun, but he becomes this ideal. The ideal is that childlike faith, that simple belief, living in the moment and taking life as a great adventure. And then we got Captain James Hook.
Yes.
And something we see about Hook is also this fear of time, this fear of death. We see it symbolized with tick-tock clock. It is a tick-tock croc. He's a crocodile who has swallowed a clock. And so you have a picture of this thing with jaws of death ticking, ticking, ticking.
Hook's afraid of an old dead clock. I think not. I think James Hook's afraid of time. Ticking away.
So in this movie, we find that he's killed that croc. He's silenced that clock, and he has a whole museum dedicated to silenced clocks. No more ticking. Hook's afraid of time.
What is that I hear?
A ticket!
So here we have Captain Hook, who's terrified of time and sees it as a crocodile, the jaws of death, relentlessly pursuing him. So here he's found this land where it seems time stands still, and he's not gonna die of old age, and he can just keep going. So he defines himself by his own glory, and he gets his own glory as he fights his great and worthy opponent.
Is it you? My great and worthy opponent?
But you see, here's the thing about God. God doesn't leave us in stagnation. God calls us out of our comfort zones to grow us, to mature us. And now we have Peter Pan receiving such a call. I mean, you have this whole thing with Gwyneth Paltrow, Wendy, aging up to Maggie Smith Granny, Wendy, so you have that whole progression going on. But I think somewhere during this time and during this season, a desire is being birthed in Peter Pan to grow, to become a father. And so when he meets Mora, that's when it hits him. It's time. He falls in love with Mora, and he decides he wants to be a daddy.
I know why I came back. I know why I grew up. I wanted to be a father.
I'm a daddy.
But Hook, though, he remains in place, and he remains stagnant. And everything he tried to define himself by has moved on.
Don't try to stop me this time, Smee. Don't try to stop me this time, Smee. Don't you dare try to stop me this time, Smee. Try to stop me.
I mean, Smee says, "Oh no, not again."
Don't try to stop me, Smee.
Oh, not again.
Now this is a powerful image because Hook is afraid of death. He's afraid of time. And now, without his great and worthy opponent, with nothing to define his life by and get glory from, his life has no purpose. So he's ready to end it.
There's no adventure here.
You call this no adventure?
Death is the only great adventure I have left, Smee.
So what does he do? He does what he can to get his great and worthy opponent to return to where he is so that he can have that opponent to fight and give himself glory. So he goes into the other world to steal Pan's kids, to draw him back to Neverland. And Peter Pan finds himself kind of stagnant, right? He comes into our world. And I love how Smee put it.
He's just been away from Neverland so long, his mind's been junctified. He's forgotten everything.
His mind has been junctified. He forgets about Neverland. So he forgets why he left Neverland. And what does he do? He begins to pursue success.
When you wake up, you'll just be Peter Banning, a cold, selfish man who drinks too much, is obsessed with success, and runs and hides from his wife and children.
That's a little harsh, but the truth of the matter is, he really is pursuing success over his family. Granny Wendy has this incredibly powerful line.
Peter, you've become a pirate.
He's forgotten everything. And now what he's doing is he's chasing his own glory. He is chasing his own honor and success. And so his mind has been junctified. His heart has been calloused. And in his own way, he's become a pirate. One of the most heartbreaking scenes is they get to London, right? And he's got a cell phone. And we're talking old brick 1991 cell phone. It doesn't even have social media on it because that didn't exist. That wasn't even a thought in our minds. But he was a slave to this phone the way we are slaves to phones now. Whenever Brad calls, he answers. If Brad says jump, he goes, how high? And so he's a slave to it because he's a slave to going after his own success. He answers the phone during Maggie's play. He schedules a meeting where he misses Jack's game. He's missing out on his kids' childhood. He's missing everything. We get to London and somehow this brick phone, gotta be roaming, is able to receive calls from Brad. And while he's talking to Brad, the kids are playing around, and this happens.
Why didn't somebody just shoot me in the head?
Bang! Bang!
But everybody just shut up!
I'm sorry.
Robin Williams is so good in this role, yet again. Like, you can feel his annoyance and his anger, and it feels like he's yelling at us, the audience. Like, we really feel it. This is how much he's lost it. He's lost it so much. Peter Pan's one of his favorite games had to have been flying, and now he's terrified of flying. I think it's because it's suppressed. It's gone. It's back here. So flying knocks on that door, and it makes him uncomfortable. When he comes to London, and he goes up to the window, and we have that creepy music, and he sees all the pictures of Never Neverland and Captain Hook. You could just feel it knocking on that door where everything is locked away as he's pursuing his own self-interest. So his journey in Never Neverland is about him waking up, recapturing the ideal he became when he was in Never Neverland. He not becoming a child again, but becoming childlike, humbling himself instead of seeking his own honor and glory as his purpose in life, discovering that life itself is a great adventure. One of my favorite scenes is the food scene, the food fight, because he's at the end of his rope, okay? His kids have been kidnapped. He tried to save them once and he can't because he's too darn afraid of flying and he's too darn afraid of heights.
Come on, Daddy. Mommy could do it.
So after a long day of training, he is at the end of his rope, starving. He sits down and all the plates and all the stuff, it's empty. It smells good, but there's no food. And he's upset. And Tinkerbell says probably one of the best lines in the movie. If you can't imagine yourself as Peter Pan, you won't be Peter Pan. So eat up. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, I would be frustrated too. I don't want to play a game. I'm starving. I need real food. But that's the point of Never Neverland. It's about belief. It's about faith. And that's what he needed to get into. It's amazing what got him into it. It was an insult fight between him and Rufio. And we get a little mini character arc in this fight because he begins all uptight and saying, this isn't right. But Rufio keeps insulting him. All the lost boys are on Rufio's side. So finally, Peter's had enough and he starts playing the game, insulting him back to the point that the lost boys are chanting, banning, banning. And Rufio's like, Rufio, Rufio, come on, guys. And finally, Peter sits down happy that he's won. And without thinking about it, he just plays.
Oh, Rufio, why don't you just go suck on a dead dog's nose?
I love it because now all the food exists on the table. Half that food makes me so hungry. The other half that food looks like Play-Doh and looks incredibly unappetizing and ugh. Anyway, the point is, now he's playing. And then when Rufio is all angry at this, he grabs a coconut and throws it at Pan. They toss a sword to him and he just... He got out of his head. He was just there in the moment and he just simply believed. And muscle memory completely took over. And it was the first moment in the movie where he looks at that sword and realizes, oh crap, I could be Peter Pan. And from there, belief begins to grow. When Hook says, my Jack!
My Jack!
My Jack.
That's a wake-up call to Peter. And he's upset, and he comes back, and he's trying to figure out how to fly, and he's, again, stuck in his head. Happy thought, I care. Yeah, right, like that works. And then he discovers their old hideout, and his memories come back to him. Now, Neverland is an interesting place, because if you thought our world can junctify you, and our world alone, so much so that Peter Pan could forget he was Peter Pan, well, think about this. As Hook begins to teach Jack and Maggie to get them on his side, he's saying, why parents hate their children? And Maggie's like, doesn't Mommy read to us every night? It's a question. Neverland is working on her mind. And then she gets confident. Mommy reads to us every night. Run home, Jack. Run home. Neverland makes you forget. Never forget Mommy and Daddy. Just as our world can junctify you one way, Neverland can junctify you the other way. Our world might make you all proud and you chase success, but even in Neverland, you can forget and fall all the way over to that immature side of things. And she's saying never forget. Peter Pan remembers the reason he left, to be a daddy. His happy thought is holding Jack, his firstborn son, in his hands for the first time.
I'm a daddy. My happy thought.
And he takes off flying. And it's a fantastic scene.
You can fly, you can fight, and you can...
Love that scene. It's so great. The next scene, Tinkerbell asks him, why are you here? And he says, oh, always to be a little kid and have fun. What's next? I love this game. He already forgot why he was here. His mind junctified the other direction. This is the importance of what the Bible calls renewing our mind so we never forget. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I kind of wonder if it's a subconscious fear of death. Subconscious fear of death driving him to seek his own glory and success so his name could always be remembered, even if it made him forget his kids. Maybe there was some fear in watching his kids grow up and time fly by. So maybe that's what drove him. He comes back to Neverland and now he'll not grow old again. And so now he doesn't want to leave Neverland. And so maybe it junctifies his mind the other way. And maybe that fear of death is a root fear in that. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity so that by his death, he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Jesus conquered death, so we no longer have to be chained to that fear of death. We can live free of that, taking the adventure of life that God sets before us. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?
I believe in you. I believe in you.
I think Hook is asking the question, what does it actually mean to grow up? Peter Pan heard the call and he answered it and he became a dad. He moved to the next phase of that great adventure, but the cares of the world choked the truth that was growing in his heart, and he began to seek his own honor and his own glory and his own success as a lawyer, and his family came in last place. But he changed and he became like Peter Pan and began living in that moment and realized his true legacy is to give the best of himself to his family.
Your adventures are over.
Oh no. To live will be an awfully big adventure.
Whereas Hook, in his own pride to have his own honor, he completely missed it. And he was left stagnant. And then in the end, I guess swallowed whole by Tick-Tock Croc. So what did you think of Hook? What type of things do you see in this movie? Let's talk about that in the comments. While you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian, and hit that bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. Once again, Aaron White, thank you so much for being a patron. Thank you for giving at the level that you give. Thank you so very much for requesting Hook. It was a blast to rewatch it and dive back into it, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.